Today we want to focus on IRS Form 1040NR. So I want to give you line-by-line instructions. So if you are a U.S. non-resident alien and you are trying to file your income tax return, this is the video you want to listen to, you want to hear, you want to watch. Don't you go anywhere. You're going to love today's conversation. I guarantee it. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. How are you today? I hope you are doing fantastic. I'm doing marvelous, if you were to ask me. If you are doing as great as I am, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka. Now let's roll. In today's conversation, I want to give you IRS Form 1040NR line-by-line instructions. So we are speaking about U.S. non-resident alien income tax return. Let's first start with the nitty-gritty. I want to define what we're talking about. What is Form 1040NR, U.S. non-resident alien income tax return? So Form 1040NR is a version of the IRS income tax return that non-resident aliens may have to file if they engaged in business in the United States during the tax year or otherwise earned income from U.S. sources throughout the year. I'll explain U.S. sources later on. So the form must also be filed by representatives of a deceased person who would have needed to file the Form 1040NR and by representatives of an estate or trust that needs to file the form. Okay, so while some non-resident alien may end up owing taxes as a result of completing Form 1040NR, many receive a refund because the amount of tax withheld when they were paid exceeds their liability. So completing Form 1040NR is especially important for non-residents who plan to re-enter the United States, because the last thing you want is to have an IRS lien on your assets if you're trying to get into the United States later on, okay? So if you wish to modify your visa terms, for example, you're likely to have to show that you submitted any required tax forms. So the takeaway here is that Form 1040NR is often required for non-residents aliens who engage in a trade or business in the United States or otherwise earn income from U.S. sources. Okay, and in most cases, non-resident aliens are non-U.S. citizens who do not pass either the green card test or substantial residency test. So if you are an alien right now and you live in the state, let's say 9 months or 10 months of the year, you have to file, or if you live here, if you are on a long-term visa here, you file the regular Form 1040, not 1040NR, okay? And Form 1040NR, this is really important, cannot be e-filed. You cannot e-file it. It must be completed, signed, and mailed to the appropriate address, okay? So it's really important. So if you file 1040, this is because either you are a non-resident alien engaged in a trade or business in the United States during the tax year, even if you have no income from that trade or business, or you are a non-resident alien not engaged in a trade or business in the United States during the tax year who nevertheless generated income from U.S. sources that appears on Schedule NEC lines 1 through 12. Okay, and some of the U.S. tax you owe was not withheld from that income. Or let's say you owe special taxes such as the alternative minimum tax or household employment taxes. Or let's say you received distributions from a health savings account, HSA, from an Archer medical savings account, MSA, or a Medicare Advantage, MSA, or your net earnings from self-employment totaled at least $400 and you live in a country with which the United States has a social security agreement. So one thing, let's talk about the audience here. So folks, we are really having a conversation about the 1040NR. So there are some special considerations when filing Form 1040NR. So who is really considered a non-resident alien? Let's just clarify that, because a lot of folks get it wrong. And so generally, people who are not U.S. citizens are considered non-resident alien if they fail to meet either the green card test, as I said before, or the substantial presence test for the tax year in question. So let's talk about those two tests. So the green card test. So you pass the green card test and constitute a resident alien if you are a lawful permanent resident of the United States at any point during the tax year. Typically, you are a lawful permanent resident if you are issued an alien registration card, that is a green card, by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the USCIS, or its predecessor, the INS, which was its predecessor organization, the Immigration and Naturalization Services. Okay, service. So, bottom line here is that you are considered to have resident status unless that designation is revoked by the USCIS or has been abandoned through an administrative or judicial process. So this is for the green card test. So pretty simple, pretty easy, okay? Now we have the substantial presence test. So the substantial presence test bases your residency status on the length of your stay in the United States during the tax year in question and the preceding 2 years. Remember, preceding 2 years, not 3 years, not 4 years. So to pass the test, non-citizens must pass both the 31-day and the 183-day test to be considered a resident alien. Let me repeat that. To pass the test, non-citizens must pass both, not just or, both the 31-day and 183-day test to be considered a resident alien. So there are two tests you need to pass here. So you meet the 31-day test if you were present in the United States for at least 31 days during the tax year, and you meet the 183-day test if the answers to lines 1, 2, and 3 on the screen below, they add up to at least 183. So I want you to look on the screen right now. So there are three elements, three questions. Okay. First question, tax year days in the US multiply by 1 equal, so you put the number of days, the first preceding year days in the United States times 1/3 equals number of days, and the second preceding year days in the United States times 1/6 equal number of days. So those are three things you need to, and those are three things you have to pass. If those amount to at least 183, then you qualify. There are certain limited exceptions in which you may meet one of those two tests and still remain a non-resident alien. That will be the case, for example, if you qualify as the resident of a country that has an income tax treaty with the United States and claim a lower U.S. tax liability as a result of that treaty. Let's talk about some considerations that you need to be aware of if you are trying to file your 1040. Very important. So, can you also file Form 1040, the regular 1040? If you want to, let's say if you are trying to file 1040 NR, can you also file Form 1040? Well, the thing here is that Forms 1040 and 1040 NR, they are not mutually exclusive. In other words, it is possible to be considered a resident and a non-resident of the United States for tax purposes in the same calendar year. So that's what experts call dual status taxpayer. Okay, so for instance, so those who are classified as non-resident aliens at the start of the year and became resident alien later in the year would have to file a Form 1040 labeled dual status return. And Form 1040 NR will be attached as a schedule with the label dual status statement. So those in the opposite situation, in other words, resident alien at the beginning of the tax year who became non-resident, must file Form 1040 NR labeled dual status return. So they will submit a Form 1040 as a schedule with the label dual status statement. So this is really important to understand. Now, one thing I've said before, and I will say it again, 1040 NR cannot be e-filed. It cannot be. So taxpayers must complete and sign the form, then submit it by mail to the address on the form. Okay, and so this is really important. So again, this applies to individuals who are not U.S. citizens or green card holders. Okay, but if one thing for sure is that if they have a substantial presence in the U.S. for the tax year and they have a U.S. sourced income, they may need to file the Form 1040. So one thing I want to say here is that, as I showed to you earlier, in terms of the 31-day test or the 183 days test, you have to pass. You have to meet those standards, those criteria in the preceding 2 years, but also in the current year. Very important, okay? And one thing I want to say here is that the form 1040NR basically requires disclosure of all U.S. source income for the year. And so for former citizens or residents, foreign source income may also have to be disclosed. Very important. Let's talk about the timing. So when is the form due? Okay. One thing I want to say is that it really depends on when you enter the country, how long you stayed. But non-resident alien employees who received wages in the U.S. should file the return or an extension by April 15th, following the tax year. Okay, April 15th. So foreign persons with income other than wages subject to withholding, they are now required to file until June 15th, following the tax year. And an extension may be requested on Form 4868. So where should you file the form? Well, you need to file the form actually there should be an address on the document that you received from the IRS, and the address should be there, okay? But otherwise, you can see on the screen right now, you want to file the return with the IRS Service Center, okay? Now, Form 1040 is not actually a long form to take, but what we have seen in our experience is that it can take anywhere from an hour to a week or more, depending on the complexity of the income and deductions of the taxpayer. Okay, so according to IRS instructions for this form, the average time required to prepare the form is about 6 to 8 hours. And so a foreign person who tries to file the form without the help of a U.S. tax professional is likely to take much longer because there's a need to study the instructions and the difficulty of understanding the language of the U.S. tax system. I mean, and the one thing you need to remember is that IRS changes rules. They do change rules all the time. So I would say for this specific case, you want to, if you have a complex tax situation, you want to enlist the help of a tax attorney, of a CPA, a certified public accountant, of an EA, an enrolled agent, or any other professional who understands the subtleties of the U.S. tax system. Okay, and basically, if you want to comply, because there are penalties, and the penalties are basically the same as for late filing and payment of taxes by U.S. persons in connections with the Form 1040. However, a failure to file will result in effective forfeiture of any excess withholding. So this is really important. You really don't want to have problems with the IRS. You want to file it as soon as possible. And if you have any question, please contact a tax professional. I want to share with you some information that is good to know. It's very important to know a few things that will help you as you are filing Form 1040NR. U.S. tax preparers should not assume that the rules for this form are the same as for the Form 1040. So it is really important. If you are a U.S. tax preparer, you want to study the 30 pages of instructions in detail. Very important. A lot of rookie tax professionals just believe that it is kind of similar. The two forms, in other words, 1040 and 1040NR, are analogous, but they're not. Okay, Form 1040NR is also the income tax form to be used by U.S. expats, and is filed filed after the expat officially departs from the U.S. as a citizen or permanent resident. Okay, and taxpayers will not file this form during a period of time when they are resident of another country like Canada, but are still a citizen or permanent resident of the United States. Okay, so if a taxpayer is required to pay taxes on their U.S. source income for 10 years after expatriating, this is the form that should be used. Very important. This is very important to know because a lot of folks believe, hey, once I'm out of the country, that's it. I don't need to deal with the IRS anymore. Blah 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 blah. No, there are rules, there are restrictions, there are timelines you need to follow. And Form 2063. This is basically the short form option for expats who have had no U.S. taxable income for the tax year up to and including the date of departure from the U.S. And this form, I'm still talking about Form 2063. This form can also be used by resident aliens who demonstrate to the IRS that their departure will not hinder the collection of any tax. Okay, and I want to talk to you about another schedule. So, Form 1040, Schedule C, is the long form that is required by those who had U.S. taxable income in the previous and current year, which would include most departing expats. So this is a special version of the 1040 that is required to secure a sailing or departure permit, which is the document that indicates that the taxpayer is no longer a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. Okay, and in the year a taxpayer officially leaves the United States, he or she will be deemed to be a dual status filer and will be required to file both a Form 1040 Schedule C and a Form 1040 NR. So the same rule applies to non-resident alien who, let's say, who moves to the U.S. to establish permanent residency. As I said before, I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another section of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. I'm still explaining to you IRS Form 1040 NR line-by-line instructions, and right now I want to walk you through the form itself, and I want you to look on the screen right now, okay? And it's important. So this is a form you can download on the IRS website, but like I said, you do not e-file this form. You have to fill it in and you have to mail it. So let's just walk through the form itself. So here we have a fictitious name, Sweetie Kiwi. We have so you can see on the screen right now. So you put your first name, last name, you put your identifying number. This could be your social or any other identifying number. This could be your TIN, your tax identification number. Okay, you put your address, you put your city, your zip, you have to put your foreign country name, the foreign province, and the foreign postal code if applicable. And if you actually receive, sell, exchange, or otherwise dispose of any financial interest in any virtual currency, you have to state that here. For this year, we did not do that. And you have to put below, you have to put your dependents. So basically, you put your children, you put the first name, last name, and the dependent identifying number. Again, this could be they can be their social or their TIN numbers, their TINs, so tax identification numbers. And you have to put their relationship to you, okay? And on the next, you can see on the screenshot here, we are speaking about the income effectively connected with the U.S. trade or business. So this is where you really detail to the IRS basically what happens. So for this example, we put the wages, salaries, tips. You can see line 1A, we put 90,000. We had nothing else. We had actually taxable interest. Okay, we didn't have taxes and interest. We had qualified dividends. Again, any of these items, if you have any question, please drop the questions below. We'll certainly answer you. We'll clarify things for you. We will elucidate things for you. Not a problem, okay? And so basically, if you add your wages, your taxable interest, your qualified interest, here are the total effectively connected income to the U.S. is $100,000. So 90,000 plus 60 plus 3,500 plus 6,500. That's $100,000. Okay. And moving on, we had no other items. So on line 11, you will put your adjusted gross income. It will be $100,000. And basically, we have some itemized deductions that will account for 25,000. So, and we have qualified business income, the QBI that applies to us, 5,000. So when you add 25,000 to 30,000 to 5,000, you have 30,000. So when you subtract 30,000 from 100,000, that's 70,000. So that's your taxable income. Again, here we have simplified things just to explain things to you. So I'm moving on here. So if you look at, I want you to look on the screen. So the tax based on our fictional example here, fictitious example here, tax amounted to $18,000. So you put that on line 16, okay? And for the rest of the sheet, we have nothing else until line 24. So your total tax, it will be $18,000. assuming you had no other items. So if you had some items, we would have added those items. And so here actually, so the federal income tax withheld from the form in this example was $12,000 on Form W-2 and was $3,000 on Form 1099. So the total taxes, federal income tax withheld, will be $15,000. Okay, so basically the total tax is $18,000, and the federal income tax withheld during the year was $15,000. Okay, so we see a delta of $3,000 right there, right? Because there's a gap of $3,000. Now let's continue. You can see on the next form here, credit. Let's talk about credit. So if you remember, we had children in our fictitious example, right? Hypothetical example. So here we have a refundable child tax credit or additional child tax credit from Schedule 8812. So in this case, hypothetical case, we have $4,000. And for the credit for amounts paid with Form 1040C, Schedule C, $1,000. So this means that our total refundable credits amount to $5,000. So basically you can see that our total payments here, because remember, a credit is different from a deduction, right? A credit is added, a credit actually reduces your tax liabilities dollar for dollar. Okay, so basically when you add your $5,000 credits to your $15,000 payments, that your total payments amounts to $20,000, which means what? Remember that our tax liability was $18,000 for the year, right? We owed $18,000. So if you subtract $18,000 from $20,000, that results in a refund of $2,000. In other words, for the tax year, you actually overpaid by $2,000. So this $2,000 you can instruct the IRS to send you a direct deposit if you have a U.S. bank account. So you can just have to put the routing number, the ABA number. If you have to specify whether this is a checking or savings, and you have to put the account number itself. Okay, and don't forget to actually sign the form to mention your first name, last name, your occupation. You have to date the form also. And this form, again, you cannot e-file it. You have to mail it. So let's quickly recap. So we are at the end of today's conversation. Let's quickly recap the conversation here. So I was just talking to you about IRS Form 1040-NR. Okay, so you need to file Form 1040-NR if you were a non-resident alien engaged in a trade or business in the United States. You represented a deceased person who would have had to file Form 1040-NR, and if you represented an estate or trust, they had to file Form 1040-NR. Thank you so much for your attention. Quickly recap here. So I gave you a definition, the audience that really should be paying attention to Form 1040-NR, the considerations you need to really pay attention to, the timing, what is really good to know about this form, and I had to actually walk you through the form itself. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.